This is a fictional mindbender. The main motivation in Gundamseed for its wars is racism. Largely, the racism held by the Earth-bound naturals towards the space-bound coordinators. By the end of the climax of the First War, the prejudice massively escalates to the point where the mutual hatred becomes so extreme that massacres become more and more commonplace and frequent, and ultimately nearly result in the mutual annihilation of the entire human race as a whole when that hate is expressed through nuclear weapons and superweapons. The Second War, however, seems to present the coordinators, or more specifically Zaft and the plants, in a much more sympathetic light, with Shadow Collective, Blue Cosmos, continuing to orchestrate the destruction of the coordinators as a whole, despite the rest of the Earth Alliance seemingly moving past that. So, all this led to me asking this question. Was Patrick Zala, one of the original leaders of the plants in the First War, right to hate naturals? Was he right to use Genesis, the giant super laser, at the end of the First War, and ultimately, per his original intention, Earth, which he doesn't do ultimately because he's killed before that? Honestly, this question is very reminiscent of my video essays that I did on Attack on Titan and Eren Yeager, since it kind of presents a very similar type of war view and crisis. Let's look at the surface of it. Blue Cosmos, through terrorist acts and governments, had orchestrated assassinations and acts of terrorism before the war had even started, and had also started the very first war in the first place. Zaft responded in kind, but not initially in a genocidal approach, since it wasn't really needed. Their tech was far superior to the Earth Alliance, and it was all the naturals could do to barely hold their own against Zaft mobile suits. Zaft, in fact, used that very technology to nullify nuclear weapons for several years, robbing the naturals of their great equalizer. When they created the first Gundams, it was the Alliance's first legitimate attempt at beating out Zaft in technology, and Zaft apparently felt it was such a threat that they tried to steal them. Zaft then took over several territories planet-side, as well as launching an all-out assault on the main Alliance headquarters at Joshua Base to keep their enemies out of space. And lastly, the development of the first nuclear-powered Gundams, Freedom and Justice, were also developed to maintain their technological advantage. However, all these were countermeasures to the naturals and the Earth Alliance aggression. Despite Zala's already apparent rabid hate of naturals, nothing at this point would signal an intention to wipe out all non-coordinators. So, by the time near the ending of the war, when the Earth Alliance fleet launches its first nuclear strike since the beginning of the war, Zala's counter-response of Genesis seems entirely justified, quite honestly. After all, it only took out the attacking fleet that was trying to nuke the plants, and even the second strike only wiped out the Earth Alliance lunar base and its reinforcement, not Earth itself. Of course, this is when Zala flips his shit and then does want to commit genocide, but again, this is all in the final stages of the game, and everything on the surface practically vindicates Zaft. Even the following Second War largely covers it from Zaft's point of view, and even in the second half, when it's clear that Zaft is being manipulated, it's still a portrayal that is nowhere near as villainous as Blue Cosmos and later the Foundation from the Gundamseed movie. So, is the plant's hatred or mistrust at least of naturals justified? Was their attack with Genesis justified? Yes and no. Like with anything, there's nuance whenever humans are involved. And if we take a closer look, there's a glaring hole in this theory of Zaft being vindicated, and it actually lies with the Genesis weapon. The reveal of the weapon to the world was as huge as the weapon itself. It's clear it wasn't built overnight. It likely took nearly the entire war to construct. And while it was revealed as a last resort to the Alliance's successful counterattacks to Zaft's other preventative measures, there's no way it would have been ready that soon without time to prepare, much less build it. This means that the intention to use the weapon was always there somewhere under the surface. Maybe a few knew about it. Maybe it was just Zala's pet project that he siphoned money into. Who knows? How Genesis would have been used had Zaft not lost control of the mass drivers on Earth is up for debate. But the point is that it was still there. However, Zaft was also justified in its use of Genesis, or at least the first two attacks. The Alliance was fully intent on killing and would not have just stopped because the first attack was thwarted or because a motley crew of rebels didn't like the reality that humanity wasn't built for total peace and pacifism. Zaft's counterattack was an escalation from the Alliance's attempted strike on the planets, but it was reasonable and logical, if still tragic. Zaft had been showing restraint since the start of the war, and even when they started killing Alliance prisoners, which was wrong, by and large, they weren't ready to wipe out the entire surface of the planet itself just to secure their survival. So yes, Zaft and the plants, I think, were justified in their distrust and maybe even hate of naturals, and the steps it took to neutralize those acts up until at least Zala's attempt of the last strike on Earth itself with Genesis. I'm not saying that hatred and prejudice is right or is a good thing overall, but given the circumstances of what the show lays out, I think most people can agree that if they were in that position, it would be hard not to. And if you doubt that, just look at the real world. And I'm sure some of you will hate this, and you can feel free to voice your dissent below, but just remember, this is just my opinion on a fictional show that I happen to like. So, otherwise, this is a fictional mindbender, and have a good day.